Good afternoon, welcome to podcast 3 of What Moves Us. Here we are again, so hi Liam.
Hi Johannah, where are we?
We're in the Oval in Vauxhall, London, and no, we're not here to watch the cricket, but we're here to join the Rail Industry Association with the Young Rail Professionals and the Civil Engineering Contractors Association, who today are launching their Trailblazers campaign. The campaign is all about initiatives and challenges across the railway industry to increase diversity and inclusiveness. We're going to be podcasting from their first workshop, and we'll be speaking to a number of the participants this afternoon, who include rail operators, infrastructure companies and industry bodies.
Yep.
So do you want to say anything at this stage about some of the participants that we will be seeing here this afternoon?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say that they've just put on some lovely pop music, so I'm going to have to talk louder through it. Right, who have we got coming today? We have Johannah Liam, Young Rail Professionals. We know her from her red hair and her extremely good views and presentations. We have Deb Carson, our friend from High Speed Rail Leaders and co-rail innovator.
And who has also just released a report this morning as well on why we need HS2.
And diversity in HS2. We've got recruitment specialists, we've got strategic rail transportation consultants, and we've got Mayanne coming. Oh, I like Mayanne.
Oh, I don't think I've met Marianne.
Mayanne.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
But going back to this afternoon, I mean, this is the start of a piece of work that they're going to be doing, which is going to be discussed throughout the year, and is going to form part of a launch of a Trailblazers guide at the Rail Industry Association annual conference, which is going to be held in November. So what actually is going to be happening this afternoon? What are the aims of it? So some of the things they're going to be looking at is, I think ultimately it's going to be about what are we doing? What is going on? In the area, what good work is already going on, but what challenges are we going to be?
Our coat people are behind us, knocking on a window. They need to go away. Busy recording.
The trouble with live podcasts, And what more do we need to do?
Well, judging by the fact that we are here, clearly we need to
do more, yeah. And in preparation for this afternoon, we thought that we'd explore a few topics and look at some of the research that's been run, because there is a tremendous amount of research out there. I mean, just in news articles in the last week, there's been items in The Guardian about how Britain is a self-serving clique that runs Britain, and that's why we're in crisis. So that's sort of like the political angle. There's been items about how pay of ethnic minorities is a lot less than white people's pay, by as much as 25% in cases. And even this morning there's been a piece in the Times on gender bias, that there is still a perception that women are best in charge of childcare, even with parity of
it's just a self-sustaining thing, because obviously society expects women to do childcare, so obviously they get more training and experience doing it. If men did it as much as women, they would be equally as skilled at doing it.
Which I think is interesting, because some of the other areas that we've been working on, we're going to refer again to Mary Porter's book and podcast a bit later on, Work Like a Woman, because in her book, one of the things that she actually explores is the fact that we've had this revolution for women, but we haven't actually had the same revolution for men. So women can, are brought up to do everything, to go to work, to do the childcare, still to do, the main activities around the house. But we haven't had that same revolution to men to say, well, actually, it's okay for you to be in charge of the childcare. It's okay for you to do those housework. We haven't done that reverse engineering. So I think is that one of our problems, and that's why I say, about society. But, other books that we've been exploring are Caroline Criado Perez, who has written about Invisible Women, which is all about design bias, right from the way products are designed in society to the way the data is collected, because we just don't collect data on sexes. and it's even worse when it comes to when you're talking to people with disabilities and people with who are of colour. There is no disaggregation of the data. It's all taken from a white average man. That's how the world of design is seen. And then I think sort of like and exploring it out into Renee Edo Lodge, who's written Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, how we all look at it through our own lenses, and Gabrielle Union, who is an American actress, and I can't remember what TV program she's in, but she was in 10 Things I Hate About You, and her book We're Going to Need a Lot More Wine. And I think that is semi-autobiographical book, but it's brilliant because you really get into actually what it's like to be a person of colour growing up today, because we're not as diverse and we're not as fair as we all think we are, because we are looking at it through our white eyes.
You're very well read though.
Thank you.
There's a whole list of things there.
Maybe I have the problem because I read too much into it. And then there's huge amounts of articles that are across the industry that cover the rail gender pay gap, because we now have to publish it, the infrastructure skills gap, diversity in transport. There is a lot of stuff, and I really do suggest that people do delve into this topic, because it is really insightful stuff. And it illustrates that there are numerous issues around diversity and inclusiveness, and that, as I've already stated, it's not just society, it's not just rail, it's societal, and that we need to address this. But what are the problems in rail? Because we think, and please do get in touch with us if you do disagree with this, because we'd love to engage on this topic, but at entry level and in the context of the whole supply chain of rail, we think it's pretty diverse. But we think the problem is actually with getting diverse people promoted to senior roles and meritocracy. So I'm just going to refer back to the Mary Porter's book again, Work Like a Woman, and I'm going to read out a paragraph.
I'll just move your microphone away from you, because I think it's flopped inwards, so people are probably hearing your heartbeat at the moment.
Oh, lovely. I do have one.
Apologies if you heard some rustling there. We're just moving the microphones around. Now, I like the Mary Porter's podcast. I do listen to it, and I find it fascinating. I also like that people have used the abbreviation for her book to be Work Law rather than Work Like a Woman, in order to get men to read the book.
Oh, no, that's interesting. So why do you like the Mary Porter's podcast?
Because she's very blunt and transparent and opinionated, doesn't hold back, but clearly has made it in a male-dominated world, and is keen to share that. I mean, the essential point from what I take from her podcast is, don't be a mean-spirited so-and-so in the workplace. You don't need to be the alpha male.
And I think that's why I like it as well, and why I was so attracted by the book, because it wasn't so much a manifesto about being like a woman. It was more about being our true selves, and about how being our true selves doesn't mean that we need to be an alpha male, that we can be kind in business, and that there are different ways about doing business.
Yes, I mean, we're both kind and lovely, aren't we?
Some might say so. I have been referred by other things in business before, which I think is interesting in the female context. But anyway, back to this quote, which is what I perceive as being one of the issues that we have as a society, and it's from psychologist John Amici, and he believes that inclusion starts with true honesty about what is happening in your business. Any change has to start with a real pragmatic, honest assessment of the status quo, and I don't think we have that, he says. Inclusion is a threat, and it's a threat to a certain group of people, and that group of people is not straight, white, older men. It's mediocre people, and our organisations are full of them. We call them the marzipan layer, we call them the permafrost. We know exactly who they are. And so it is no wonder that we don't get the kind of movement we need, because we have people who are perfectly adequate at the job and don't cause enough trouble. They know how to handle the appraisal and make sure they get the grade. And I have added the brackets this, which is mediocre and middle, which means that they stay where they are. And of course we all know somebody, again my own words, who gets promoted to their level of mediocre. So is it time that we start shifting and challenging that marzipan layer, as Mary challenges to in her book? What do you think, Liam?
I do very much think that we need to shift it. In my vocabulary, I call it the blob. You can see that cloudy middle of an organisation, which, having come in at the bottom of a large transport organisation, you could see that you were just going to get bogged down in this middle management area of, as you say it, lots of people, in order to get to the top. And I think, having stepped out of working for a transport organisation and being freelance and doing commentary and advocacy, you can see that people at the top really want to see change. People at the bottom are hungry and have the energy to deliver change, but there's a cloud in the middle, which is probably what, if not a firm barrier, it's just a fog. A fog that's stopping diversity change, it's stopping modernisation.
So what we need to do is find how we get through that fog.
Well, yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I came out of the organisation, assumed that I would do my freelance thing to get past the fog, to then go in a senior level later on. But I certainly couldn't see myself morphing into this blob to get through.
Do you think that as a plan is working for you? Do you think, are you progressing?
Well, I'm being more opinionated, and I think doing things like this, being listening to the Rail Innovation Group, is very successful. But now I would find it very difficult to go back into an organisation and conform to an organisational structure. And whilst I would always fight and say you shouldn't have to conform, you work as a team in a big organisation and rely on other people.
But I guess in some ways, have you found your calling then? Actually, that a big organisation wasn't for you, and
yes,
in terms of your talents and your ideas and that, you're suited to being an independent, to being an influencer, to being a trailblazer.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Thank you for putting it like that. I have a red face now. Yes, putting it back to you though, because you are obviously of a more senior position and have had lots of different careers. What have you discovered about yourself? Apart from the fact that this is the third podcast and I still have not got any cake from you.
I know, you see, part of that is I'm just too busy.
Reading these books.
Too busy reading books, attending, because obviously we had the latest Rail Innovation Group last night, so I am frequently busy and don't very often bake cakes these days.
For our listeners, I would like to highlight that your Twitter handle is the Cake
Princess. and I'm very disappointingly lacking cake.
Carrot cake.
I think it's interesting because
you've just
since our last podcast, I have left High Speed 2, and I think what I have found at various parts of my career, because I've worked for a lot of big companies. I've worked for American Airlines. I've worked in the civil service. I've worked for train operators, and what I always find is that I probably always do come up against that marzipan middle. Yeah, and I think moving around has helped me bypass it. Yeah, I think you can kind of go into an organisation and be there 2 or 3 years, and then you have to move on.
Yeah.
Because in some ways, I kind of almost am recognised more by my external peer group than maybe necessarily the people I'm working with.
Okay. Given the fact that you have advanced, as you say, by skipping between organisations, would you still say it's the marzipan middle, or are you finding a ceiling?
I think at the moment I may have reached the ceiling.
Right. So no further for you.
Who knows?
Has that ceiling hit you on the head, or have you just been aware of this line approaching you?
To be quite honest, I was never aware of it until I started getting there.
Right.
Yeah, long pause while I think about it, because I've never really been, I've always believed in diversity and inclusion and that, but I have become more aware in the last 2 years probably about how uninclusive society is, and I don't know whether that's because my job has required me to think a lot more about it, but to be blunt, life is bloody unfair for lots of people.
Yeah.
And I think because of that I've become more aware and I've started fighting for it more, and it's an important subject for me from a personal point of view, but also for other people as well, because I don't want to labour the point too much, because I am a highly privileged person. I'm white, I'm a woman, I'm married, I own my home, and I've had good jobs, I've been to university, I went to good schools, I am highly privileged. And maybe that's why I've become more aware of it, because I'm more aware now more than ever of how privileged I am, and how and if I was to go back 100 years, if you were to look at my family history, 1919, my Irish side of the family, they were living on a tenant farm in Northern Ireland, it was Ireland then, it wasn't even Northern Ireland, so my family has come a long way, and I think it's that social mobility that has really made me become aware of the issues surrounding inclusiveness and diversity, because we've kind of lost that. Could you imagine now somebody who comes from that sort of level of society now, in that period of time, raising, becoming, in the top, it's a lot harder now.
So let's say if we put on a 1 to 10 scale, of 10 is obviously managing directors or the chair people of boards, 1 is your entry level person at 18. Would you say that you've got to about an 8 now?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good assessment.
And you're, as you have said, a privileged white woman, and you got to an 8. So have you seen other people who aren't as privileged as you get stuck at 6 or stuck at 5? And
frequently, I think even
is it a barrier, or is it themselves? You can see that they didn't either push to get higher, or there was actually a cause.
I think. From what I have seen, I think people make judgments about people and about where they can get to, and then people prevent people moving up. I've seen that frequently throughout my career.
You've had your go.
Not even that. I think they think you're limited or you can't do it, or people, and then
because you can't do it in the same way that the seniors did it.
Or you went to the wrong university. Because I didn't mention this as part of sort of like the preparation for this, but you look across senior people across the rail industry, they pretty much all went to a Russell Group university. A lot of them went to grammar school or public school, not all of them, but sort of like, particularly if you look at the policymakers and DFT, a lot of them do. And having worked in the civil service, it does remind you of a boarding school, or a public school where in between lessons you're going up downstairs to various meetings or lessons or whatever. It reminded me of. I went to a private boarding school, and it very much reminded me of my days. So you can kind of see people who have no life experiences in civil service they go to school, they go to university, and then they go into the civil service, and it's the same. They're hanging out with the same people, they get the same interest. And that's not to say the civil service is a bad thing, but they have.
We're here to try and.
They have similar experiences, and it's the same. With people that are running transport, they have similar experiences. They go to good schools, and I'm not saying all of them do, but a lot of the people at the top do. They say they go to Russell Group universities, and then they tend to swap around between different senior positions. So my husband, for example, likes to call it football management for people who can't play football.
Yeah, and I do think that, especially in a transport context, that's an important point, because the people making policy decisions, if it isn't a diverse team, then they don't make the decisions that will help everybody. So we're paying taxpayers' money on schemes, and then we have to commission people to go and do studies on how normal people need the transport network to work, because we don't have any normal people planning the transport.
Yeah, well, it's not even really about normal people. It's about we all have our own biases, and we all have our own lens that we look through things, and we look through our own lenses, and it's very difficult to learn empathy when you're always looking at it from your white privileged viewpoint or whatever. It is it's a tough ask, and you've got to be able to put yourself in those shoes, and you've got to take time to do that, to understand that. And I think that's what's really interesting about Caroline Criado Perez's book, in the sense that she talks a lot about the data and how the data is not segregated, and that's why it's not that necessarily people are want to do bad things or do things in a wrong way. It's just that we're not disaggregating the data or collecting data in the right way to be able to enable a balanced decision.
Yeah. Yes. You just reminded me, so my previous time as transport planner, we used to do a thing called legion modelling, which is you plan stations and you do a schematic of a station, and then the model assigns a blob for a person, and you see all these blobs that move on and off trains, and you can see the colour of the blob changes depending on how close they are to each other and how they're bouncing around, and how long it takes all these little blobs to get off a train and go up the escalator out of the station. The way you just dealt with disabled people in those legion models is the blob was bigger.
Bigger and slower. All disabled people, or people who couldn't get on and off the trains by themselves, were all just assigned a bigger blob. I think we should do a podcast on legion modelling and the future of AI. Right. Because there's a whole load of bias that's being built into AI because of the people that are programming it.
0.5% of people are a bigger blob. They're all the same, they're just a bigger blob.
So I think that's probably got the discussion off to a good start, thought-provoking.
Because I do actually, sorry, just before you do that, I would like to say that we are in the Oval. Do you know a little bit about the Northern Line extension, which goes from Kennington to Vauxhall, well, to Nine Elms, but it doesn't go under the Oval, which is a straight line, because this is owned by the Duchy of Cornwall, Prince Charles, and it's Crown Estate, and you can't compulsory purchase Crown Estate. You come under it, so the line goes around it. You can go through local.
How many seconds does that add to the?
I'm sure it's a much smoother curve around it. But rather than have to go through that bureaucracy, it just goes around it.
No, Gio, a lot of transport planning happens because of who owns the land, doesn't it? And the way, and if you think, sort of like, why doesn't something do that? A lot of it is because because somebody royal or whatever owns the land.
Estate, yes. But that's just another a privileged position.
Yeah.
Just
apt talking about privilege.
The establishment reason for something. So our plan today is leave the sunny outside, and we were going to go inside to the workshop. So we're going to hopefully pull aside so seamlessly to our listeners. It will just go through, and you'll hear some interviews in a minute. For us, we need to go and actually take part in this workshop.
Excellent. Let's go and join the group.
Yes. See you later. So we're midway through the workshop, which has been very interesting, and I have managed to grab a filmer from the Institute of Civil Engineers. Now, you made a very good point earlier, which I wanted to just capture before you ran away, and it was about outreach to schools, and we as a rail industry struggle to get people to go to schools who represent or who look like the people at schools. So do you just have any comments on that?
Oh, absolutely. As I said before, with schools, is when you go to the periphery of the city, you find that the demographics change quite a lot.
Yeah.
So it's very important to have ambassadors who represent those demographics.
And where are you able to pull upon any from Rail who look or act like those, or use the same language as people in schools?
We do. So we're very fortunate that our young members actually come from the different backgrounds and from local areas as well. But quite a lot, we find that schools are getting more and more specific as to the type of engineers that they want in schools. So BAME, for instance, and it's quite difficult to actually ask for engineers for a specific...
generic engineers.
Yes, exactly. Because luckily, everyone wants to do a little bit to help. So it's very tricky to actually approach that kind of subject.
Yeah.
But we try our best to always fulfill the school's requests.
Okay, cool. All right. I know you have to run off, but thank you.
Hi Claire, we've been at the Trailblazers workshop this afternoon, so I was wondering if you could just introduce yourself and your organisation about what you do.
So I'm Claire Ludlow and I work for the London Enterprise Advisor Network, which is all about bringing businesses into schools to support careers education and make it a bit more work focused and in touch with what's going on in the world of work so kids can make informed choices when they leave school.
So school came up quite a bit as a theme during the workshop, and you mentioned something that I'd never heard before. It was quite different about the perception of Rail and how we talk to children in their language. So could you just explore that for me a bit more?
So I think kids make a decision, young people make a decision based on what they're exposed to. So, someone mentioned there that Google was quite a cool place to work. They're on the computer every day. They search up Google. It's a brand name that appeals to them. And I think the rail, if you think about the rail industry, where do they, what's on the news, what coverage, what branding are they getting about the rail industry? So if you're thinking about going to work as a career into the rail industry, why would you? What's the attraction? So if we're trying to encourage kids to go into the rail industry, let's think about selling up the jobs, the opportunities, and what rail does for the travel, the opportunities, how important rail is for the industry and the world country.
So do you think we should be less engineering focused and more focusing on the softer side of it, that it is actually about people and about getting people to work, getting people to hospital, those types of things?
Well, yes, I think both sides. So engineering is really important. We need to encourage more people to go into engineering. There's massive shortages. We do that, but the rail industry as a whole, you'd automatically assume, that's the signalman and I say signalman, don't I? The railway, the drivers, whatever. But what else? It's all the other things behind it. And I think to open the doors to the rail industry, these are all the different jobs that are there. These are the things you can do. This is the career opportunities you could start. I met someone once that was running a rail station, which I always thought was a wonderful job. That's using management skills. That's nothing to do with trains per se as we perceive it, but it's a really exciting job. There's a lot of opportunities. So I think it's opening the doors to the rail industry and saying these are all the different things you can do apart from just engineering, building mending the tracks and driving the trains.
Popping that microphone towards me for a second is, if the branding for the rail is so bad or poor perception. No, that's my opinion.
Okay, thanks.
My position for perception is what a lot of the opportunities you just mentioned. Why are we telling people that those are rail industry jobs? Why aren't we saying you're a facilities manager, or you're an IT supplier, or you're in my case, I want to promote startups? But why do we have to add on all this baggage of the rail industry?
It's a really good point, and actually all the types of jobs. So when we talk about careers, so my background's in getting unemployed people into work, and we used to help people think about what jobs they wanted to do. And we talk to people, and we do the same in careers to some extent, is think about the skills you've got and your fields of fascination. So you may be really good at managing people, but what are you interested in? Are you interested in amenities? Are you interested in sport? Are you interested in medicine? What's the fields? What's the books that if you were stuck in a library, which book department would you go to? Or if you were stuck, more modern now, if you were Googling, what subjects do you look at? And that's what interests you, and then you add your skills to it. So if you uncouple the jobs within the rail industry, you're right, and separate off, say these are all the different jobs around, or if you're interested in rail, then what are the jobs that you could do in there, and separate the two off. It kind of makes it, you're going to attract more people, aren't you? You're going to attract the two sides. Does that make sense?
It opens it, and actually you're pursuing an interest rather than actually saying at 11 years old, this is what I want to do, because who knows at 11 really what they want to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And or because your mum's or dad's in the corner going, this is what you're going to do because I did it.
You want a good job and a good career.
Yeah, exactly. Or this is what we do in this family and this is how we pursue it. But actually to break it down, because the other thing, we don't all know what our dream job is. I mean, I'm still don't know. So so you break it down to a manageable chunk of things you can do and things you like, then.
And we need to sell that in rail, that it's not just about being a signaller, it's not about being an engineer, it's advertising that rail can be cool.
Absolutely, and you can be part of that in different ways. You can add to the coolness of rail and the usefulness of it in your own way, your own skills.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
We've had loads of kind of involvement.
So we're back out again by the cricket, and I am speaking now with Lucy from the RSSB, which Rail Safety and Standards Board, and Tim from Network Rail.
Yep, that's right.
And what you both mentioned inside during the workshop was about staff network groups. And I just wanted to get a bit short conversation from you. So Tim, you mentioned that Network Rail has, I think, 16% of the workforce is female.
Yep.
And so you've decided to change the name of the staff network group, the Women's Equality Network Group, to be the Gender Equality Network Group. And you made the point that you can't expect 16% of the workforce to do all the work to get equality.
Yeah.
So in that respect, do you have any advice then for Lucy at the RSSB, who's talking about an LGTB plus Q plus staff network group? How would you advise setting that up to make sure that, again, it's not the LGBTQ plus community who are expected to do all the equality themselves?
Yeah, I think what I'd say is kind of our staff network evolved basically, and it started off as a women's support network because there was a lot of bad stuff going on within the company that basically the women needed a safe space to talk about some of the things that they were dealing with and figure out how they were going to resolve it.
Right.
And that was fine for kind of where it was originally, but then as the conversation has moved on, as we made progress with diversity and inclusion, more and more men wanted to get involved, and so when they started approaching this group staff network to say, right, we want to see more women in the industry, we want to see more things happening, how can we help that happen? Originally we were told, well, you're not even actually allowed to join the staff network because it's only for women. So we campaigned and made it so that men could join, and then we said it's no longer now a women's network, it's a gender equality network. And what that's done is that's really kind of opened it up and made it feel like a much more inclusive place. But really it's tapped into the fact that a lot of people and senior people within the business knew that they wanted to do something to support, and they believed in the overall thing, but they didn't know where they needed to go. So by creating our Allies program, it was a group of people that said, we want to actually make small tangible changes within the business and do little things in our business area to make some improvements. And it's really resulted in quite a lot of action over the last couple of years, so we've made some significant progress. We've still got a long way to go, but I think it's been really useful. So I think Allies programs are really good for staff networks.
How have you included the Allies and at the same time made sure that you aren't actually eclipsing the people that the network is intended for?
That's a really good point. So I think it's a balance that we've tried to strike. So one of the things that we've done, for example, in a company that is 83% male, whenever we wanted to do some really good promotion about things like International Women's Day, because we want to celebrate the women within our business and show how fantastic they are and promote everything about them, the usual feedback we were getting is, but you're not doing anything for International Men's Day. 83% of the company is male, you're not doing that. So actually,
Is there an International Men's Day?
There is. It's in November. November the 17th. And anyway, I don't need to go into the details about that. But basically, by making sure we were celebrating everything about everyone, it then allowed us to justifiably do that focus that we wanted to do on women when International Women's Day came along, because we could then say, people just assume we haven't done anything for International Men's Day, and of course we have done some stuff. So you point them towards that and say, so there you go, we've celebrated some things, we've got some people involved. but now we want to, because it's International Women's Day, we want to justifiably celebrate those women. So I think finding that balance to say how can we all support each other was a key part of that.
Have you looked at extending it beyond your own organisation to, for instance, contractors or supply chain, etc., etc.?
So we've had some initial discussions. So, for example, we've talked to TfL. They've got an allies program for their gender equality network, which I can't remember if it's a women's network or a gender equality network now. But we've done an element of some of kind of the people running both organisations talking at each other's events. But we're at an infancy, I think, in actually doing cross-company collaboration, and it's something that I'd like to promote a lot more. So I'd love to see more stuff happening across the industry as a whole. So I think that'd be fantastic. And I know in Network Rail they've just set up a allies program to the LGBTQ network. So they've actually got an allies program now as well. So again, I'm sure they'd be really keen to kind of collaborate and share any lessons learned on setting that up as well.
Fantastic. I think you've given me everything I kind of need, really.
Excellent.
Certainly from Network Rail.
That's good. Okay, thanks guys.
That's all right.
Right, so we're back out watching the cricket, but we have just grabbed Gaynor Pitts from the Rail Industry Association, because you made a very interesting point in there that you engaged with some of your members who made the point that diversity and inclusion either was too difficult or was not one of their priorities. So I just kind of wanted to question is, given that we think that makes them less competitive, should we just allow those companies to just fade into history and be replaced by the more diverse companies coming up?
Very good points. I struggle with the same thing, because I guess at events that RIA's run, I've had those kind of conversations where people say, you know, maternity leave is just an extra cost for me, flexible working is just an extra problem for me to sort out, and when there are other people who can take those jobs, then I don't need to worry. And I feel the same. Should we just let them carry on and not take any, you know, not look further than their own business? But
does industry then need to do an exercise with government on showing the value of diversity and how actually you get a return on investment for that investment?
Yes, I guess that would be useful. I think the information's out there for people who really want to know. It's like everything else, like quality, safety. If you're good at those sort of basic things about how you run your business and you have excellence running through it, then you're probably going to be good at diversity too. And I would think most people in business do understand that. So it's a question of how much do we put of the vital resources we have in the industry into helping those businesses that perhaps don't know quite how to run a business well.
So focus on those who want to make change rather than
perhaps
dragging them along.
That's my personal opinion, obviously.
Not the official
Not the official RIA.
Right, Gaynor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi Joe, would you just introduce yourself for our podcasters?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm Jo Muffets. I work for Atkins, which is a engineering and project management consultancy, part of the SNC Levelling Group, and I'm a practice director of our transportation engineering practice in the UK.
And a very well-known group within UK Rail. So we're here today with RIA Trailblazers launch event, and we've just been speaking to Gaynor about the problems of getting people engaged in diversity, and you made a very interesting point about how it's not a nice to have. So can we just explore that a bit further?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see that diversity and inclusion in our culture is not a nice to have, it's a must have. It weaves through everything that we do in terms of delivery of projects, retention of staff, any number of things. There's a whole raft of research which shows that a diverse workforce and an inclusive culture leads to better business results. So we don't see it as a nice to have, it's a must have. Our issue is about making sure that we weave it into all elements of our culture, so that it's something that we become, it becomes more of a habit that we do rather than something that we kind of have to work very hard to overlay. And we're still at that sort of early stage of in that sort of journey of maturity.
So where in that journey are you? Because you say it makes good business. So are you seeing the results of it being good business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see that we're able to pull together diverse teams and diverse teams that have kind of a wide variety of strengths, and we focus with our teams on what actual strengths we can pull together in terms of that collective intelligence of the teams to actually improve our delivery of projects.
And do the team see the value of it? Like, are you making that inroads in that culture that it isn't that nice to have, that it is valuable to have diversity?
Yeah, I think they do see the value in it. I'd like to be able to say that, you know, everyone's absolutely convinced and engaged, and it's become a habit already. The reality of it is that lots of people are engaged, lots of people do see the value. We've still got quite a long way to go, so that's why we continue the focus on it.
And just one more question. What advice would you give to our listeners in order to make that cultural change, if you could say it was one thing that makes them start on that journey?
Oh, if there's one thing, I think it's about engaging as many people as possible and making it meaningful and understandable to everybody in the business as to what it is you're trying to achieve, rather than talking in a language that's maybe not landing with people. Is making it kind of personal so that they can kind of own it and properly understand it themselves.
Yeah. So that's actually, that is about talking in their language and making it meaningful. What does it mean for me?
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
So that was a really great afternoon. So what conclusions or insights did you take away from the workshop?
I'm sorry, I just dropped my microphone, but I'm putting it back on now. There we go. Hopefully you can hear me. I took a couple of good thoughts came out. So as our listeners will have seamlessly moved through the vox pops we took through the session, now that we're afterwards, two of the points that I wanted to take from that event were, we're still, in my view, talking about people have to commit to coming into rail. So we're saying the challenge is getting people to make effectively a life or death decision that they're going to be a rail person. And I think that that's the wrong approach for us to be taking. There are lots of peripheral jobs, people who are doing bits and bobs around the side of rail, whether it's a software job, whether it's a retail job, whether it's a planning job, but they're not in rail. Whereas I think there's a thought in industry that we need these people to be rail people.
There's kind of a structural cultural problem there, isn't there?
Well, yes, because
and the mechanisms don't allow you to sort of like flit around a bit and be that
we're both
jobbing
freelance.
person.
We're both freelance and we job around and we do flit in and out. And certainly I don't spend my entire waking day being a rail person. But for some reason, and that might be a culture change thing, that might be that people in rail are those people committed to rail, therefore they want other people to commit to rail.
So are we the trailblazing cool kids then?
Absolutely, definitely. The other thing I just wanted to mention before we move on is one thing that it was raised during that was the concept that, unfortunately, if you're going to get more diversity in the rail industry and you're going to raise the number of women in rail, you have to start at apprenticeships. So your gender pay gap is actually going to get worse for the period whereby it takes you to get these apprentices in and then get them through the organisation. You're actually going to look as though you're doing less well.
Yeah, do you think that was a point that was more about the low level that apprenticeships start at, rather than actually about the actual pay gap itself? Because
but
the
there would just be a
apprenticeship
higher
pay
proportion
rates,
of women at the lower grade.
And
We'd
I
have to wait
think
for them to
that's
get
a
through.
problem overall, because when you look at the stats that all the organisations now report on, I mean, a lot of them, and data is important in the sense, a lot of them report that structurally they don't think they have a gender pay gap, but it looks bad because more women are at a lower level down the organisation, but structurally that's bad anyway, isn't it? Regardless of where they sit, they're still earning less and they're not in senior roles.
Yes.
And I think
when they get to those senior roles will not be as highly paid because there are more women.
And also because they've started at a lower base rate anyway.
Well, no, there is some statistic. Actually, I heard this from another podcast, which was that as women get higher represented in senior roles, the pay goes down, and if as men get more representative in sort of caring roles and the lower skilled jobs, pay goes up.
So in some ways that makes sound good business then to employ more women because it costs organisations cheaper.
Yeah.
Although that's probably an unintended consequence of
Yes.
that.
Now,
And we wouldn't want to encourage that.
Yes. Now, I know you have a very good summary you want to finish with, but I just wanted to segue nicely into that by saying that we spent the afternoon in a room of 25 people, 17 of whom were women. But I'm very curious how much effort it took to get a room like that, which is completely unrepresentative of our industry. But these people now can be the trailblazers after a lot of effort.
Or turning that question on its head, are they the trailblazers because they're the minority group? So they have a vested interest in attending. And actually, you have the opposite problem in the fact that if you really want to make headroad, you need to get more men in the room, or more of the senior men in the room.
Yes. Yeah, but at least coming together we have an influence and a voice.
Which I kind of think that quite nicely wraps into sort of like my final sentence that I want to say. And it's a quote from Alice Walker. And this is what's really important in terms of diversity, I think, and how we can influence and change our behaviours, because the most common way people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. And I think we all do have our own superpower, and we can change things if we really want to.
Yes, through the power of a podcast.
Absolutely.